I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Welcome, everybody, to the final episode of Biased Reactions Bestiary 3. This has been a 7-part journey to get us here to the back section of the book, and we still have a final selection of monsters to show to you.
Final round! Fight!
Final round.
Alright. So, we're going to do all of T through Z.
There we go. Starting off with the Tattoo Guardian.
That's right. What list of monsters would be complete without a Tattoo Guardian? The answer is every list of monsters other than this one.
So the Tattoo Guardian, to be clear, is not the dwarven fellow here. Is not the Tattoo Guardian.
Not a Tattoo
Guardian. Tattoo Guardian is literally the tattoo.
That's right.
So Tattoo Guardians are...
It's not like a dude who guards tattoos. It's a tattoo that guards dudes.
Yes, exactly. So the Tattoo Guardians can come in a variety of forms. They slowly fly around and they can slash out with their blade of ink. But they create a special bond with their wards that allows them to protect them.
That's right. So they can retaliate if somebody tries to attack their ward. Their bond is pretty complicated, but really mostly what it's saying is that it'll attach to the ward and give you kind of a shield other situation. And that makes... And you can even use the Tattoo Guardian's AC and saving throws, which means they're particularly good at guarding like a really weakling low-level NPC because of that fact. It kind of doubles their hit points and makes their AC and saves way higher for a very low-level weakling NPC. Most PCs are probably not going to get that much out of 19 AC plus 8 Fortitude plus 11 Reflection plus 6 Will, but the shield other is
and then the
50 extra hit points.
The interpose,
yeah. Interpose to
give a circumstance bonus to AC. So yeah, it would be nice to be
it's super
with
useful
one of these
anyway. And fly free where it gets out of the bond. And Tattoo Guardians, usually they die when their ward is destroyed. But if not, they sometimes just kind of stick around and
maybe
defend the
for
corpses
someone else
or look for a new person.
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Guardians, the Terracotta Warriors. We've got both Terracotta Soldiers and the pretty high-level Terracotta Garrison.
Terracotta Warriors are a perfect example of why you should never, ever try to put a troop and another monster on the same page. Because of the fact that there is, no flavor text about the Terracotta Warriors almost at all. And a lot of, thanks to, several miracles of General Susumu and some copy-fitting magic, they fit on the page altogether, but, they certainly don't have much to say about what these things are and why they do what they do, other than the cool sidebar about runic impressions on Terracotta Warriors.
I see that the art is very carefully positioned to not take any of the...
Well, that was just lucky. And then, the runic impressions, I think, were originally part of the stat block, and then they, kicked out another sidebar to just be all the way in the sidebar, and then a number of other strategies.
Strategery.
Yes, including, just, saying for the immunities, these are the same immunities that it had up there, and it just barely fits. So, basically, the situation is, they're soldiers, so even though they're constructs, they're not mindless, they've got attack of opportunity and shield block, like you might expect from a soldier. That's basically their deal. They're weak to bludgeoning. You can smash the Terracotta. And then the garrison is this giant, gargantuan garrison full of them, and similarly, it does sword and bow attacks, just like the individual one does. So, it's kind of lucky they didn't have a lot of abilities to begin with, otherwise it certainly would not have fit.
What about the Terror Bird?
Terror Birds. Also sometimes known as axe beaks, There are terror birds. They can sprint around and do some persistent bleed damage. There's also the even smaller diatrema, which are in a sidebar. They're kind of first level weak adjustment terror birds.
And the Terror Shrike.
Yes, the Terror Shrike is even more terrible than the regular terror bird.
Because it has a sudden charge and a stunning screech.
It sure does have both of those two things, which and also its tearing clutch is much more dangerous on a critical hit. But yeah, stunning screech is a one action that can potentially stun you.
So they sprint out of nowhere. They've got a huge amount of mobility with sprint. Between sprint and sudden charge, they run in and they deal persistent bleed damage if they crit you, and they stunningly screech at you and which still flat-foots you even if you succeed. So.
Yep, they're very likely to do a turn of stunning screech and sudden charge in some combination of orders, depending on when they're in a good space to do the stunning screech. So you better watch out for a Terror Shrike. They also have knockdown on their Talon, but they're unlikely to pursue knockdown on their Talon until the turn after they've used their stunning screech, because they just don't have the actions for it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they can do any one of their melee strikes with sudden charge, so they could suddenly charge you and then do a knockdown if they suddenly charge you with the Talon, even though it's a little weaker than the.
Or if they're super duper far away, they might sprint and then do something because that will let them triple move.
It does let them once per minute do a triple move. So it really depends. If they're more than 120 feet from you, sprint attack is good. If they're less, then they can sudden charge because that already goes 120. And they could save the sprint for a escape.
So what is Titalic?
So basically, the situation with them is that they are a mythological creature that is known for kind of like drinking all the water from their original stories, which are from the Australian indigenous mythology. So they basically, that's why it talks about their mythological origins and some of like the tales of them. They just want to drink your water and put you in a bad situation. So they're a kind of a big frog-like huge amphibious creature, and they will spend a day or more drinking from a water source and consume like 5,000 gallons of water per day.
Wow, and if it does that, it becomes waterlogged and gets a bunch of abilities that it can use.
Yes, that's right. And it can expel a wave while it's waterlogged that does bludgeoning damage. And that's sort of like a cone attack. And you can provoke it into releasing its water by telling a joke that it's funny, and then it laughs and disgorges the water, which creates a swamp's a 10-foot emanation dealing some bludgeoning damage. And I think also that, let's see, you can provoke it. It can voluntarily do it as a 3-action activity that has the concentrate trade as well. And so that's kind of what happens.
Yeah, and it can also expel a wave of water as well.
Yep. That doesn't take that much of the water out, so it can just do that every 1d4 rounds.
That's kind of a breath weapon-y type thing.
It's just this cone-like
the whole
spew.
Classic 2-action every 1d4 rounds.
It can also spit a small amount to do a fairly decent amount of bludgeoning damage to you. So, but it does have a thing. Its speed goes down from 25 feet to 10 feet while it's waterlogged, because it's just like, I can barely move. I've got thousands of gallons of water in there. So that's the deal with Titalic. There's also the Tidehawk, which is another water-based thing that starts with TID. So they are kind of similar friends/relatives of phoenixes.
Oh, I see. So they've got a resurrection ability as well.
They're water phoenixes. So they're also rare. They're level 12. But yeah, they've got a self-resurrection where they melt into a torrent of rainwater, which falls into a body of water, such as an ocean or lake, and returns them to life. But if they die above land, you have to wait for the water cycle to get into an appropriate body of water.
Makes a lot of sense. I see in this sidebar here that they're favorite of Gazra.
Yeah, Gazra likes them because they can fly and they also have water. Like, what's not to like about that? And they've got oceanic armor, where when they're near a large body of water, they can draw water into themselves to gain a +2 to AC. It's one action, so it's kind of like a shield. And if they take damage from a melee strike when under the effect, they basically explode the water outwards, dealing automatic damage to the creature, but they lose the AC.
Oh, the rain typhoon dive is cool too. So they dive below the surface of the water, but it's not just, oh yeah, I'm gonna dive below the surface of the water and attack you. It deals bludgeoning damage to everything within 60 feet.
Yes, and I mean, you're probably not below the surface of the water anyway. So it can be really annoying, because if the surface of the water kind of can break certain attacks or make them have cover. So it's down there, you're up there, and then you just took 66 bludgeoning damage. And the water is really choppy and is difficult terrain if you were in the water and trying to swim in it and below the surface of the water. So there's a lot of fun, and they've got Coat of Cold and Control Water and 2 powerful heal spells. They've got a lot going on. Big amount of wave sense, although it's imprecise. That's Tidehawk. So after that is Tikbalang. So do not confuse them with Titalik, even though they are both mythological creatures that have the TI and a lot of consonants. But the Tikbalang are very different. They do not gorge themselves with water, and they're from Filipino folklore. So
they like to lead travelers astray.
They're chaotic neutral.
They're not really malicious about it, but they have a bunch of occult magic and illusions. They can maze people. They can create hallucinatory terrain.
It's very easy to trick them with lies. They pretty much believe illusions and lies. Like, that's kind of their weaknesses. And they also, even though they use illusions, like, it's because they believe in it so much. That's part of what makes it powerful. They can kind of flail around at you, doing some extra damage and making 2 fist strikes. But
there's a cool sidebar here about, like, why would anyone bother to try to hunt them down if they've got all these illusions and other things like that? They have each have a single strand of golden hair that's valuable and can hold magic particularly well.
Yep. But they grow it only once a year. And they have a giant unnatural leap. So that's kind of their deal. Then there's Titans.
Titans.
Yes.
Are
Titans.
gargantuan, as you might expect.
Yes. Some of these are pickups from AP, and some of them are not.
And as you can see
the
here, they're all
Titan is
super duper high level.
They're very high level. They're gargantuan Titans. And Titans are like a type of being from the outer sphere who were created by deities and were nearly deific in power, and they tried to overthrow the gods, and it didn't really work out. Some of them did not try to overthrow the gods, and some of them did. And the Elysian Titans are the ones who did not try to overthrow the gods, and they're just fine. And they're around, and they're chaotic good. And so they've got an aura of impossible stature, where it just seems they're even larger than you think. And so if you don't exert your will save, just like approaching them becomes difficult terrain, or greater difficult terrain on a critical failure, because it's like they're just so big and so far away from me, it's impossible.
They've got some really powerful divine magic, including 10th level Meteor Swarm and Revival.
They sure do have that. And they can throw a rock for just a lot of damage. They've got a huge gargantuan great pick. They've got...
Their Titanic Grasp lets them attack creatures that are affected by their impossible stature, even outside the normal reach, which means that they can punch you from 100 feet away.
As long as you failed your saving as impossible stature, then yeah, they can. And their wide cleave can make a melee weapon strike against everyone in their reach, which counts as 3 attacks for their multiple attack penalty. That's only 2 actions, too. They are level 21, so Thanatonic Titans are the ones...
We're locked away in the abyss.
Yeah, Thanatonic Titans, they actually did fight the war against the deities, and they worked as assassins. They were some of the masterminds of that, and now they're locked away in the abyss. They're chaotic evil, and they love being evil. They've got Impossible Stature 2. They've got Attack of Opportunity, which is pretty nice. They do not have Titanic Grasp, but they do have Titanic Charge, where it's like a sudden charge, but also with Earthquake.
They've also got the God Slayer ability, which
they sure do.
Anytime they damage someone who can use divine spells or abilities, they have to succeed at a really hard will save or be unable to use divine spells and abilities for a long time.
Oh, well, even if they succeed...
They succeed, it's one round.
They cannot use their divine spells or abilities for one round and are frightened too.
And you need a wish or other powerful non-divine magic to undo the effect.
It's pretty obnoxious due to the fact that you don't become temporarily immune. But on the other hand, a lot of creatures that can use divine spells and abilities and that really care about that are fighting level 22 Thanatonic Titan probably have Resolve, which means when they make it, they critically make it. Mm-hmm. So, woe betide unto thee if thou dost not have Resolve, because this Titan can probably lock you out of divine spells for the entire fight unless you get a lucky critical success. Even then, you might fail. But yeah, it's got Massacre and Meteor Swarm level 10, and it's got a Giant Halberd. It's going to mess you up with its Giant Halberd, which has a reach of 40 feet for its Attack of Opportunity.
And both of them have 8th level Dispel Magic at will, which is pretty convenient for getting rid of any annoying buffs that your PCs might have put up.
Even more powerful than that are Danava Titans. They're lawful. They are sometimes pillars of reality, although those are more powerful Danava than these basic Danava that are in here. They were too inflexible. They refused to join the war against the gods, but they also were so they did join because of the fact that they were spurned by the gods for being too inflexible. That's what it was. And so they were cast into the paralyzing depths of the sea. Some have escaped, and they have Depths of the Sea powers, they have Inflexible Danava powers, and the Danava Pillars are even more powerful than that. So their basic deal is they have a Hadalic Presence, which means that if you fail against their possible stature, you are crushed by the depths of the darkness of the ocean floor, and you get Darkness, 10th level, on you, and the Titan can use their wave sense to detect you even though you're not in the water.
And they can use it as a precise sense in that case.
Yes, and on a critical failure, you're immobilized. Plus, they're relentless, so they're permanently quicken 1 to strike, stride, or sustain a spell, as one of the actions necessary to cast Dispel Magic, so they can double Dispel on a round if they want. Or Dispel and cast, like, Implosion. They've got a reaction called Roiling Rebuke, where, excuse me, when they're within 200 feet of you and you do a thing to them, they will rebuke you by shooting a benthic wave at you, which, if it hits, will disrupt you. And they've got a giant great club. They've got a foot to trample you with. They've got a benthic wave, like
they've got 10th level Implosion.
They do. And they've got 9th level Dispel Magic at will, which they could use their Quicken towards casting. Plus, they've got rituals that are pretty good, and they've got Trample and Wide
They can resurrect on their own.
Yeah, they don't need secondary casters. They can planar bind some allies, control the weather, like you do. Then finally, most powerful of all of these is the Hecaton Kyres Titan, which is one of the 100-handed ones. They were supposed to guard the gates to the abyss, but they were too terrifying and rebelling, so the gods cast them into the gulf between all of the planes. And they basically, there were basically 3 of them, but they sort of, budded off like icebergs into more and more of them, and they use their interstellar darkness and the fact that they have 100 hands to attack you. So they are even more powerful. They have all-around vision because they also have a lot of faces on there. They have an Impossible Stature 2. They have Attack of Opportunity, which has the adorable note. It's not a free action like it is for some creature, but the Hecaton Kyres gains 99 additional reactions on their turn that they can only use to make attacks of opportunity.
Well, there you go.
So it's possible for them to run out, whereas there's some monsters somewhere that got it as like a free action. They've got their void weapons.
Was that the Ouroboros?
It might be.
Yeah.
They've got their void weapons, which are just the weapons that they have in their 100 hands, which they can use in melee or range. They can bind Seer Soul, Dimension Door, Plane Shift, and Weird. They actually don't have at will dispel like the other ones.
Once per month, when they arrive in a plane shift, they can arrive in the wake of shattered planar barriers to create a 10th level storm of vengeance to announce their presence.
Like you do. They can reach between realities with a single action to drag a foe closer to, or drag all foes closer.
Within 120 feet.
Everybody is like, it's like, get over here!
Yeah.
And then you're paralyzed for a round on a critical success.
And as free action, it can grab you if you're within 30 feet.
That's right. If you're within 30 feet after
that, yes.
After this happens, where you are teleported to any square it chooses, which it can choose one that it can grab you as a free action. It has a 100-headed whirlwind where it just attacks with everybody in reach. Even on a failed attack, it deals 24 force damage.
And if it's got you grabbed, it can throw you into a maze once everyone.
Yeah, it'll do that. It'll be like, go into this lightless void between worlds. And as a free action, it can mold more of its void weapons, which are fun and educational.
If by educational you mean...
It teaches you about the void between realities. That's very educational.
By dealing a lot of damage, yes.
That's very educational. You never say that Hackathon Carries does not, like, teach you things. That's right. Alright. It looks like David the Grey is biased towards T through Z due to having written some of the monsters in there.
Very cool.
So, next after that
Speaking of high-level creatures, but not
Tolokand.
Tolokand.
That's right. So, Tolokand are very destructive. They don't necessarily follow Ravagug or the Four Horsemen when dealing with that situation, but priests of Ravagug think Tolokand are pretty cool, but Horsemen followers are kind of split on whether they are. Tolokand are kind of like just... They're an aberration as they move along through area like bad stuff happens. The stream runs dry, the earth cracks.
They emanate poisonous smoke around them. They have toxic blood.
They're known as waste walkers because of that. They're just very nasty.
They're extremely hard to slow down or stop.
They poison you with their aura poisonous smoke. They can see through it. You can't. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They don't care about difficult terrain, and they recover from all the conditions that would slow you or make you lose turns at the end of their turn.
A purple worm.
Yeah.
And their blood is toxic too, so feel free to attack them, but if you crit them, it's going to do some poison damage and kill, non-creature plants in the area.
As you might expect there, from that, and also the poison dripping off the claws in the art, their melee attack is poisonous as well.
It's just a hand.
Yeah.
It's not even a fist. They just kind of touch you with their poisonous hand, and it slashes into you and deals poison damage. And they can do cloud kills and earthquakes and horrid wiltings and volcanic eruptions. They only have 3 slots for spontaneous spells, and they don't go down to lower level spells. So they're a very strange spontaneous caster. It's just like, any 3 of these cataclysms, please. Mm-hmm.
And you might wonder, with their innate spells, why are their innate spells so much lower level than those spontaneous spells? But that's because any time that they move action, they move 30 feet or farther, they just cast one of those innate spells as a free action.
That's right. It's like, oh, do I want to Earthbind, haste myself, or do a sudden blight? I don't know. Well, I'm a Waste Walker, so that happens. Plus, if it hasn't cast any of its spontaneous spells during a turn, aka it's 4 big Cataclysm spells, as a 1 action, it casts one of its spontaneous spells, using up the slot normally, and then can't cast any spontaneous spells this turn, and can't use Sudden Destruction for 1d4 rounds. So, enjoy its 1 action Horrid Wilting.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty nasty. Speaking of things that can be pretty nasty, how about the Tooth Fairy?
Yes. They hatch from buried teeth.
That's right.
and they have pliers, and they like to pull people's teeth out, causing persistent bleed damage.
They are afraid of cats. Cats love to hunt and kill tooth fairies.
And when they're destroyed, they explode into a burst of
Plaque. That's right, which can sicken you. But they'll pull out your teeth and deal bleed damage. There can be they come in swarms, and the swarms can pinch you for bludgeoning damage and sicken you and pry out your teeth for even more damage and giving you penalties on charisma-based checks and harder to do verbal components. They're not very friendly.
They are not.
That's basically the situation. They're Fae, so cold iron.
But they fear cats, so that's a good way to ward them off.
Yep. Trail gaunts. You know how there's all those undead that are just like, I'm the undead of this is how I died and now I'm going to make you pay for it? Mm-hmm. Trail gaunts are the undead of like, I got lost in the woods or just died on the trail trying to get somewhere and died of starvation, thirst, and exposure. And now you're going to pay for it.
And you'll hear it when you get near to them because they have, they mutter, and they mutter and groan in a deeply unsettling way that frightens creatures.
They hate roads. They have a serious problem. They've got dromophobia. They can't willingly walk on or across a well-maintained road. They can burrow under one. If they're forced onto a road, they run away until they're not on the road. They can create spawn by killing you out of sight of a well-maintained road. Yeah, their muttering is scary. Their movement speed is very slow because they got lost. It's 10 feet or burrowed 10 feet. But
if they bite you with their jaws, then you are likely to, unless you succeeded to save, you'll suffer intense pain in your legs and feet and move super slow like they do.
And they ignore difficult terrain, greater difficult terrain, because they're all often in off-road areas. So
you're probably going to find them in a place where the terrain is super tricky and they don't care.
In greater difficult terrain, your 25-foot speed is slower than their 10-foot speed, and that's before they bit you. It's only slightly slower, but it is a little bit slower. If you're an elf, then you're about equal to them in greater difficult terrain. Mm-hmm. That's the Trailgaunts situation.
How about trilobites, who can also form swarms?
Trilobites. Well, you know, they're an ancient Cambrian thing that was not really as big as these trilobites, but we'll have these trilobites anyway. Mm-hmm. And they like to curl up to give themselves more AC. After they take damage, they'll attack you with their Natho base.
And they'll try to run away and hide.
Oh yeah, they will. They're not exactly the most aggressive creatures. They mostly just trying to escape and survive. That's part of why they have such hard armor.
But when they swarm up when they decide to swarm up to challenge difficult prey, then they've got some nasty cling bites where they gnaw on the prey.
Yep.
In hopes of taking it down.
That's right. That's the situation with trilobites. What about Tsukumogami? Well, Tsukumogami are...
Oh, that's a cool art.
Yep, the art for the Tsukumogami is really good, and that's we've got the art for the Kasa Obake and the Itan Momen. The art for the Shochin Obake is also good, but it's not in here. Mm-hmm. But it's probably in like the Pong collection. So yeah, they are intelligent mobile objects that when a 100-year-old object kind of merges with a kami, it creates a Tsukumogami, and they can be harmless or mischievous or sometimes malicious if the object is kind of ignored for a while. They have different personalities based on the situation with the object. And they're commonly found in areas that have a strong cultural belief in the value of caring for objects. So there's like little tales about a red scarf that goes with the Itan Momen, or watchful sentries with the Kasa Obake. The Itan Momens they're usually neutral, and they look like normal cloth, but they're not exactly normal cloth, and they will engulf you potentially and grab and do a constrict if they want to attack you. Kasa Obake is going to use a reaction to sort of fade away into the darkness and can do a jump scare to demoralize you. but they mostly like to play tricks. They're actually neutral good, but they're definitely pranksters, and they like to do jump scares anyway. They know a lot of things, so and they look around at stuff, so you might be able to talk to them and try to get information about the area, but they adore wordplay and puns. So if that scares you more than the jump scare, then you might not want to do that. The Chochin Obake, on the other hand, the lantern ones that are not depicted here, kind of don't wake up the same way as other Tsukumogami, and they're very difficult to maintain for long enough to spawn in Tsukumogami, because a paper lantern that lasts 100 years, like, how are you going to do that? But they're a kind of fire kami that takes the form of a lantern flame and inhabits a paper lantern. They're neutral evil. And they've got an aura that can draw upon the life force of others to sustain themselves, because, you know, they're a little bit off due to the way that they were formed, dealing negative damage and giving them some hit points back.
And if people try to leave that aura, they can use a reaction to try to bind them, the creature, using their own shadow to stop them from moving away.
That's right. And they attack with tendrils of flame that deal negative and fire damage, or shooting the flame at a distance. And they can grab you in a tendril flame and constrict you for more negative and fire damage, just for fun. Alright, Tupalak. Well, Tupalak is a construct, and we had these in Pathfinder First Edition too, but they are a mythological construct that is artificially crafted from animal bones.
Generally created to serve as instruments of vengeance, though they often far outlast their creators.
That's right. And this one is from says Greenlandic Inuit religion. So they've got a spell that's kind of carved in there. Fireball is kind of the default in case you don't want to pick, but you should pick what it is that's going to get vengeance. It could cast it 3 times per day, and it's just going to follow around, and it's going to do the vengeance. Now the problem is that they're
just going to keep blasting indefinitely. So if you're an archaeologist digging up a site, you may find one of these ancient instruments of vengeance and get attacked by it.
Yes, they're basically immortal and built for vengeance, and they don't always necessarily stop when they're created for a terrible, unforgivable crime, but it's like, okay, if you want to get vengeance for this crime and utterly destroy an enemy, it might wind up slaughtering their entire clan or settlement until it's slayed everyone even remotely related to the original offender. Or create more tragedy for its creator than the crime that precipitated its creation. Whoops. Even eventually murdering its creator's spouse in one story due to a distant relationship to the original target that no one knew about.
They have -5 int, so they're not going to like carefully weigh the pros and cons here.
They just have this sense about the connection, and it's not always the best choice to create a Tupalak.
But if you're looking for even broader scale, for disasters of a broader scale,
how about Tsitsimiro?
Yes, what about these guys?
The solar eclipse undead. They are gargantuan electricity undead.
They've got the classic ability that I remember for them from Pathfinder First Edition, where they have a reaction where it's like, oh, did somebody use a positive spell? Maybe they were trying to heal, for example.
How about negative?
How about negative energy?
Yep. How about, oh, I guess you harmed your allies.
Oops, you were trying to save them and you killed them instead.
Yep. They're jerks like that. They're so evil that they're actually weak to good damage, even though most undead are not.
They shoot laser beams out of their eyes.
Yes, they do.
Electricity and force.
It's ancient Aztec laser beams.
Yes.
With
they
electricity
can
and force
teleport
damage.
around and do a wail of the banshee.
They can. They can make an eclipse where they cast darkness and drain the heat and warmth from the darkness spell's area, dealing cold damage and slowing you.
Also, they get temporary hit points every time they hit you with their claws, and they might drain, and they might make you drained if you don't succeed at a very difficult fortitude save.
Yeah, they can create undead and imprisonment ritual too. They are harbingers of the end. So that is T. We did it, Linda. We did it. We got through T.
What about you? There's only one creature that starts with you.
There's only one, so I think we could get through you in the next hour, probably.
Yes, probably.
It's Umasi.
They harvest appendages and organs from other creatures to craft onto themselves because their bodies are always decaying.
That's right. So they're
actually aberrations, not undead.
That's right. They're not undead. They're alive, and they basically are decaying and have an issue, so they need to harvest organs, but like they don't do it for fun because they want to kill you and harvest your organs. They need to harvest organs or they're gonna die, and they're chaotic neutral, and they'll try to take pieces that don't necessarily cause them to have to kill like a bunch of sapient creatures, so they can sometimes have conglomerations of exotic beasts that are just onto them. And this one looks much more human than a typical Umasi just by chance, because they can have more arms than this too, just that are sticking out of them from a lot of different creatures.
No two are going to look.
Additional legs that are coming out. Just they need to keep grafting to keep themselves alive. So they've got Immortal Flesh ability, which is they can't heal or recover hit points except using flesh grafting techniques from the sidebar.
But they don't take damage
where they spend 10 minutes to graft flesh onto themselves to treat wound.
But they don't take damage from positive or negative damage.
That's correct, because they're not undead, but just positive energy can't heal them.
Yeah.
They just can't be. That's their curse. And so the more you hurt them, the more that they're going to need to harvest even more organs. And they can consume organs to gain temporary hit points, but doesn't actually heal them, but it does give them a buff. And they've got a harvester poison that they can use to poison you. It doesn't make the organs poisonous to them. That's their deal. Alright, that was you. It took a really long time.
What about V? Valkyrie.
V is for Valkyrie. Valkyrie are another kind of Aesir monitor from that are cat neutral, just like the Einherjar that we did before. They are basically choosers of the slain, which means in this setting that they have to be boneyard advocates, which they basically, when they see a slain warrior and they do their claimer of the slain ability on the material plane, it just looks like they spend 10 minutes praying over the body of a creature, and then if it's worthy of becoming an Einherjar, it does. But what actually is happening is they've fragment basically their psyche and the quintessence, the spiritual essence that is kind of solidified into a creature that a lot of monitors, celestials, and fiends are made out of. And the other half goes into the River of Souls and collects and advocates on the slain warrior soul's behalf in the Boneyard. Is like, come on, look at all the cool stuff they did. You should let them become one of the Einherjar. And if it works, then Valkyrie merges back, and you also get the new Einherjar. So that's kind of what's really happening during this 10-minute period of time.
They have Raven servitors that they can command and see through the senses of.
That's right, up to 3 ravens, and they can constantly observe. They don't have to spend actions to see through them. They've got the attack of opportunity reaction, but also once per day, they can kind of heal a creature that is not a construct or undead, reduce to 0 hit points with a dying value of 2 or less, to called Recall the Fallen. You know, if they're not going to die quite yet, then it's not quite their time. Although, of course, that's going to presumably mean that they can continue the battle, but they might be killed and be claimed later on. They can plane shift around. They've got disrupting weapons, and their Storm of Battle ability hurls her spirit to the air, creating a massive storm and a 100-foot burst spears of lightning rain down upon the enemies, dealing 4d12 electricity damage.
I'm imagining doing that at sea too, because the flavor text at the top talks about Valkyrie servitors.
Mm-hmm.
Valkyrie ships of Vesvara.
Mm-hmm.
How about some
Alftros
more?
said that the Chochino about it looks awesome and was shared on Twitter.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I said that it is awesome. It just isn't in there.
How about the Nosferatu?
Well, they are a type of vampires that were twisted remnants of mortals who died in great plagues of old. Much like every other kind of vampire, they're super complicated because of the fact that they offer a mini template, and of course, as usual, it says, hey, don't use this mini template. If you have any amount of time, you can just use the basics of it, but actually customize the creature for its level. But if you don't have any amount of time, and then you could just flat apply this template onto it, it's close. So it gives the stat adjustments and some hit point and fast healing and resistances.
Are, if you have a creature that is below 8th level, it's not really going to be significant enough to become a Nosferatu and should probably be a regular vampire instead. These are going to be more challenging foes for your.
They're a little more powerful. They've got a resistance to all physical damage except magic wood. So if you've got magic wood, then that's going to help you to fight against Nosferatu. They have basic Nosferatu abilities of dark vision, negative healing, immunities to death effects, disease, paralyze, poison, and sleep. And they have a revulsion of garlic and holy symbols, which is kind of similar to some of the other undead. Magical stakes driven through their heart will put them at 0 hit points, although staking them requires 3 actions and only works if they're unconscious anyway. And sunlight is going to slow them down and potentially destroy them. They've got a plagued coffin, which they can kind of disperse into rats and go to the coffin and recover in that coffin. They change shape into a swarm of rats anyway if they want to. As a free action, they can command their thrall, giving a single command to one of their thralls.
They can maintain a number of thralls up to their charisma modifier.
That's right. They can telekinetic haul things around. They've got the Plague of the Ancients, which drains and enfeebles and dooms and eventually kills you. They were formed from plagues. They can dominate you. They love drinking blood. I mean, they are a vampire. And there's even a little sidebar about building a Nosferatu thrall, where they create a thrall, and you can convert non-mindless living creatures into a thrall by applying the abilities. That's right. And there's also Nosferatu overlords and thralls, because why not?
Yes.
So the Nosferatu overlords have an aura of sickness in addition to everything else that all the other ones have. They've got vampiric insanguination. They've got a paralytic fear when they use a claw attack that can make your mind freeze up in terror, and even on a success you're immobilized. But you can still do whatever you want. On a failure, you're going to be restrained, which is horrifically bad. Because all you can do is try to break free, and then they're going to be able to drink your blood.
Nosferatu thralls gain fast healing, but they are weak to mental damage because of the Nosferatu's damaging effect on their minds.
Plus, they're mind-bound by the Nosferatu. If other creatures try to target them with a controlled condition, the Nosferatu immediately attempts to counteract it, because this is my thrall. Plus, they've got 2 reactions. Mortal Shield. If their master would take damage, they throw themselves in front of it, taking half the damage. And Rally, where if they end their turn more than 30 feet away from the master, they're like, wait, master! They stride their speed toward the master.
So, yes, these abilities are very much for the benefit of the Nosferatu, and
they absolutely are.
And not for their own survivability.
Yes. There's a sidebar about the historical sort of origin of Nosferatu, and then we get to the actual Nosferatu. There's a thrall stat block that is actually not a Nosferatu. It's just a random thrall you can use with your Nosferatu that swings around great clubs and follows the Nosferatu. It's pretty basic and has all the thrall abilities. There's the Nosferatu Malefactor, which is kind of your basic Nosferatu. that is angry and evil and has all the abilities from above, but not much else.
And then
the Overlord.
Nosferatu Overlord.
The Overlord is way more powerful than the others. It's both a Nosferatu Overlord, just as it says up above.
Yes.
Plus, I think it may have other abilities, like the vampire had spellcast. I guess not, because Nosferatu Overlord just have so much.
I think that's all, like, telling it, that's just how many things they have.
It just had so much that it didn't do anything else. That's all that it does. It's still ridiculous.
It's like, what do you mean that's all that it does? It has, like, 10 abilities.
I mean, yeah, it does. It has, like, 10 abilities, but, like, the super vampire also was a spellcaster on top of everything else, just because we wanted to cause ourselves to have to do even more things that time.
I don't think much more would have fit on this page.
Alright. Well, what about Vanara?
Yes.
They're monkey-like humanoids who dwell in treetop villages. And there's a legend that a human hero beseeched an army of them to help defeat an immortal Rakshasa that is based on the Ramayana, where Rama wanted some help from Hanuman and his monkey Vanara friends to defeat the Rakshasa Ravana and free Sita, his wife, who had been captured by that Rakshasa, and that is kind of what the sidebar is referring to here. So, these Vanara have certain abilities that are here. They
have a prehensile tail.
Yep. Which is a little bit prehensile. It does the kind of things that all the tail abilities with other ancestries can do, where it can do some pretty basic stuff, like, but not things that require fingers or manual dexterity or holding items, so it can probably open a door. They've got a bow staff because that's pretty cool. They can do flurry of blows. It's clearly this is Vanara disciple. It's clearly some kind of a monk.
They also have a pest form to turn into a monkey.
Yep. And they can spring up when they're prone. They stand up and step twice without triggering reactions throughout that.
What about the Vildarabin?
Vildarabin. That was definitely one of the most popular monsters from Bestiary 5 and Pathfinder 1st Edition. They are a rare fae that is kind of created by the powerful elders of the First World to kind of go after boastful mortal rulers. And so basically, they've got an aura of disquietude where they're gonna frighten you and make you suspicious of others and your own allies. They can, like, shapeshift into your allies. They've got all sorts of occult innate spells, including a powerful ethereal jaunt and AoE suggestion, or I guess multi-target. They attack you with your greatsword, their jaws, and their talon. They can turn into a bunch of other forms, including a hybrid of raven and wolf parts.
And if they kill you with a critical hit with their jaw strike, then they'll devour your heart and soul as a part of the attack.
It's fun. That's just kind of one of their situations. Yep.
Don't fight one of these guys if you can avoid it.
They like to do that. That's kind of one of their favorites. Then there's Vishkanya. Vishkanya are a type of ancestry that is more often found in Vudra. They're rare even there, but they're a little less rare in Vudra and Jalmaray. They can envenom with their saliva, which is venomous. They have Vishkanyan venom, and this is a infiltrator, so it's got sneak attack and some poisoner abilities, and is flexible with tight situations. So that's kind of the situation with Vishkanya. They've got Ophidian eyes. They're just like a little snake-like. Not a lot. That's kind of the deal with Vishkanya. Alright, what about vultures?
Yes. This is a giant vulture.
It is.
And it carries it has carrion fever that it inflicts with its beak attacks, and just like real vultures, it can projectile vomit
if necessary.
Dealing acid damage and also sickening, because that is disgusting.
Yep. And Vulture. It talks about vultures in sort of divine legends. In Northern Garun, they're kind of revered because of their service of getting rid of the corpses so that they don't cause an issue. Where in Osirian, whereas they also have unwholesome connections to Lamashtu and Urgathoa in other folklore. Next up, we finished V. We did it.
We made it to W.
W
Wayang.
is for
The
Wayang.
Whisperblade.
Yes. What is a Whisperblade? I guess.
Whisperblade is somebody who has it looks
sneak
like
attack.
Sneak attack.
It
So
looks
it's
like they're
a
kind of
roguish
like
one,
a roguish type
but
one.
from being a Wayang, you can see the shadow play ability.
It looks like it can damage something and then try to tumble through with a bonus on that, leaving a shadowy after image that might make the opponent flat-footed. And then it's also got +1 to saves versus darkness and shadow.
So most Wayangs live in Tiansha, particularly in the archipelago of Binata.
That's right.
They have there's a lot of a cultural tradition there of storytelling, puppetry, whisper singing, dancing, and shadow magic. And the shadow magic that Wayangs have builds its way into many of their fighting styles.
Whisper singings are very quiet.
Yes.
They go and they sing a song that is very, very quiet.
Yes.
That's kind of their situation there. So, next up after Wayang is Weasels.
Weasels! There's a regular little weasel here with grab and constrict and the ability to fit its way into tight spaces. And as we often have for animals, there's the bigger one that is more of a threat.
That's right. Weasels definitely do some interesting things that are... The information here is true about weasels. They're insatiably hungry, eating almost half their own weight every day. They basically are nearly fearless, going after creatures up to 5 times their own size. They kill more creatures than they need and stuff their victims into hollow logs. They
try to confound their prey by moving around erratically to the point where the prey just has no idea
even
what
just
the weasel's
throwing themselves
trying to do.
on the ground.
So that the prey doesn't know when they're going to strike.
That's right. It's pretty funny. They also have a strong musk, which is not strong enough to be a special ability in the regular weasel, but in the Megalictus, it looks like it also isn't. So it's not really an attack, but it discourages predators. Yeah. They have Megalictus has all the other abilities of a normal weasel, but they can also constrict you with piercing damage, which is less of like a constrict really, but it's more of a it's more of what it says in the description of like grabbing you with the bite and like latching on. Yeah. And it says a constricting bite. Constrict is usually when you curl around them and do bludgeoning damage,
but it still uses the mechanics of constrict.
Yeah, this allows it to not have to write more when it didn't have space to write more. Correct. And so that's why it's called constrict, but it's not quite constrict, but it has all the mechanics of it.
How about were creatures?
How about were creatures? Well, as we can see from here, werebats have a wing that is ridiculously large.
Werebats have a wing that requires the text to fit into a tiny little column. Well, in general, were creatures can communicate with animals of the same general kind. They can change their form between a humanoid form, their animal form, and a hybrid form in between the two. And they also have a curse where they also have a curse that is tied to the full moon.
That's right.
Can force them to go on a rampage unless they succeeded to save.
Yep, and on the full moon they can get extra boosts that make them more powerful. Yes. So werebats form bat colonies, and they like to add to their colonies. They are bats. They're they can thrash around with their wings like some of the other giant bat creatures can do. They've got echolocation. They sure do. Whereas were crocodiles are a little different because they are very violent and greedy.
All right, the curse of the were creature isn't the moon part. The curse of the were creature is the part where they turn other creatures into were creatures.
That is Correct.
With their bites. Whether
They
that
sure
be
do
fangs
that.
in the case of the werebat or jaws in the case of the were-crocodile.
They're pretty complicated, and there's more rules about them in the bestiary, but not here. Because if they were here, then there would not be enough space.
Yes.
The were-crocodile's got a twisting thrash where it will bite you and then kind of... It's like a death roll, except for it doesn't exactly do a death roll because it's also not completely a crocodile in all of its forms. It's got aquatic ambush like crocodiles, and of course it can take a deep breath like a crocodile too. So
very cool.
That's the situation with the wares.
What's a wizard sponge?
Well, it's a kind of a fungus that some wizard was like, oh, I bet I could clean my tower if I made a fungus that didn't eat my inorganic stuff that was in the tower that I wanted to keep around.
Okay, but how many creatures came about because some wizard blank? That's like the origin story for, I don't know, like 5 to 10% of.
It's also sometimes referred to as wizard's broom. Which, like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where they made the brooms and then they went out of control. Because ultimately, the fungus went out of control. Even though, it was created to be edible, just in case.
Mm-hmm.
And it had sort of some safety features where it was healed by fire in case, like, the tower was burning down, it could put out the fire. But it just cleans the area.
It deals some acid damage, so it's cleaning the area. But there's also a bunch of different variants depending upon where their lair is.
That's
so one
right.
in a crypt might gain negative healing. One in a Fey domain might gain weakness to cold iron and be...
They kind of just take up different properties, and they've evolved beyond their original creation. So now they don't just clean things up, they might also slither into you and deal acid damage and clean you up. And sort of suction to climb on ceilings and get some fast healing when it would take any kind of fire damage. So that's kind of the situation. It's a swarm of fungi.
Yes.
Alright, that's Wizard Sponge. Next up, Walloped. Wallopeds are a large animal that you are kind of less likely to use than almost any of the other creatures here because they are only from the planet of Triaxis. And you're probably less likely to go there. But if you do, you probably want Wallopeds because they're kind of a major domesticated creature from Triaxis. So just like if you were on Golarion and you might have horses and cows, you're gonna have a Walloped.
It does look like they may have spread because it talks about ranchers selling their fleece. So there may have been a few that have it looks like some of them
there's a few in the Kodar Mountains in
Yeah, right here it says few in Golarion realize they're not native to the world that they originated on Triaxis.
Oh, I guess some of them must have come through during Reign of Winter.
Yes.
Although there wasn't much of a window for that. So, but I guess it's possible that since they did not have any natural predators, that they're an invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why there's some more now. So there you go. There's a way that you could use them without going to Triaxis. Their main thing is they stride on ice, they can trample, and their regurgitated wrath once per hour as they spit up the contents of their stomach, kind of like the vulture did before. They can spit, tusk and hoof. Pretty simple stuff, but they're still like they've got a lot of legs. They're almost about as strong as an ogre, so it's stronger than a normal horse. And that's Wallopeds.
What about Wormwraith?
Wormwraiths are a little stronger than Wallopeds.
Yes, they are. Wormwraiths are a type of incorporeal undead that forms from the souls of dragons who refuse to accept death.
That's right. They can take either an incorporeal form or an ectoplasmic form, where they push through the veil of ectoplasm that is sort of between the ethereal and the material plane. You kind of push through, get this kind of goopy ectoplasmic exterior where they're a little more solid, and it changes some of their statistics. With phase lurch in their ectoplasmic form, they can still kind of lurch through things.
I like their positive energy transfer reaction. They're just like, why don't you take the positive damage, undead over there?
Yeah, not me.
And their claws rend apart divine magic.
They like to do that. It's kind of fun. They've got a breath weapon that deals negative damage and draconic frenzy. They can drain your life and get some hit points back and possibly drain you. They're not really super friendly dragon creatures. They hate everything, but they also hate themselves. So, like, the amount that they hate everything else and themselves is, like, which one is the one that they hate more? But they refuse to accept death. And then there's also...
And they can create a bunch of undead, too.
Oh,
so
they sure
can
can.
use for that redirection ability.
There's also Elder Worm Wraiths, which are even more powerful than regular Worm Wraiths by a lot. They can consume souls.
In a 60-foot cone?
Yes, making
to doom and deal
creatures
massive
become
amounts
doomed.
of negative damage and possibly just outright kill you.
Yeah, it's just, you know, they like it. It's fun. That's kind of one of their new abilities. They do even more negative damage with their breath weapon.
Also, they've got they've got a miracle, so, like,
Yeah,
10 level spells.
They can create 10th level undead and do a powerful imprisonment, too. So...
They're pretty nasty.
They are. They're pretty powerful. So, less powerful than that is Weirwood.
And this is another ancestry type creature. So you can see that there's the Weirwood Sneak. This one is
That's right.
Sort of a rogue type. But you can see here that Weirwoods don't need to breathe. They are organic constructs.
That's right. They're organic constructs that are made out of wood. They don't really need to eat or drink either. But they are organic, so they are alive, even though they were constructed. And they've got a short sword and sneak attack because it's a Weirwood Sneak.
Mm-hmm. And they were originally created as sapient magic servants, but they gained their freedom a while back.
And they
and
don't
still
really
not
have
that many of them. They are rare.
They don't really have a foothold in the inner sea, but there are more of them in Arcadia, but they're still rare. But they're even rarer when it comes to the inner sea, because if they're rare as a monster, you can bet they're super rare as an ancestry. Because some of the monsters that are not even rare are still rare as an ancestry.
Yeah.
So speaking of things that are very rare, Yithians. Yithians are like this Lovecraftian situation where like they projected their minds into they know how to project their minds into things. If I remember correctly, like these purple creatures that you see in the art is not even their original body.
Yeah, Yithian is the mind, and then this is the body that
this is the body that their entire civilization went into, like this general purple thing. They're kind of all in the purple things now, but then they can also go from these purple things into you by using they still can use their mind swap ability, and they can use their mind swap ability from, I guess, pretty far away. It looks like they normally use it with possession. Yeah. I guess it must have been a mass ritual when they used it, like across universes.
Yeah, well, they said they organized a mass mind swap with species from another. That sounds like a ritual.
Yep, they've got a ton of annoying resistances that kind of can bring you back to Pathfinder First Edition for horrific flashbacks of when everything resisted everything. These guys do. They have not like the greatest hit points as a result, but they've got hypercognition. They've got a lot of mind abilities and thought sense. If you're not a mindless creature, they're going to be able to sense you with their imprecise thought sense, unless you are hiding from that. Just try to blink your mind a little bit, use stealth, same thing as everything else, or have that feat where you're just taking precautions against every kind of special sense, and so you don't have to be like, GM, remember, I'm blanking my mind because there might be Yithians.
Hopefully you don't live in a situation where that's something that you expect might happen. What about Izobu?
They come from the world of wanting to be sure they were the last thing in Y.
Yes.
So Izobu are kind of, they're herd beasts, but thing about them is they're nasty and nobody, like, most people can't handle them. They're super aggressive and they stink horribly and they're an invasive species. They're just, they're a big problem to everybody else. So hobgoblins love them.
Yeah, hobgoblins are immune to their stench.
Yep. They're a part of Hobgoblin society.
So with the rise of Oprah, a lot of other non-hobgoblin ancestries have become a lot more familiar with these favored herd animals.
They've got a stinking aura, and they have horns and hooves. They're pretty basic, but they're very important to hobgoblins.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to Z.
Zetogeki.
Zetogeki.
Giant lizards.
They don't eat other creatures, but they can still ravage the local population because of how territorial they are.
Yes. They have
They're
scales.
earth lizards.
Yeah,
They're animals, but they actually literally have the earth trait.
Yes. They can shift their scales to better absorb the kinetic energy from physical blows and give themselves resistance, but that also slows them down.
Yep. They drink mineral water. That is basically how they get everything they need. And so
and
yeah,
you can see from the shape of their bodies how really they are made of rock and earth.
and realigning their scales to their slow speed, but with major resistance. Then they can realign it into kind of channeling out the kinetic energy to do more damage. That's sort of their two forms. That takes a pretty complicated ability that takes up a lot of their space, and they can mangle you with their jaws. I mean, who doesn't like to mangle someone with their jaws?
Fair enough. How about zombies?
How about zombies, Linda? That's the end of the line.
The very last spread in this book.
So we've got, just like skeletons, we've got some new special abilities for zombies. Ankle biters, where they just attack you from the ground with no problem and actually get a bonus on tripping you from the ground.
Persistent limbs, where when you cut off whenever you critically hit them, the limb falls off and then continues to attack.
Yep. They've got
putrid stench, where they smell
aura.
awful.
And unholy speed,
where they're super fast.
Yep. And then there's a troop of zombies, the Shambler troop. Who doesn't like a...
We had a troop of skeletons.
Yeah.
We need a troop of zombies,
troop
too,
of skeletons was
all of your undead overlord
Troop
dreams.
of skeletons was at least a little more, like, together and working together, where the troop of zombies just kind of shambles around and just lashes out. It's a little weaker, I think, as a troop.
Yeah, it is. That's why it's lower level.
It's level 4. And it's got a 20-foot move speed, and it's still permanently slowed, and it's going to run around zombieing you like you do. There's also the Sulfur Zombie, which is stronger than an entire troop of basic zombies. It's got Fire and Necromancy combined, which is never a good thing unless you're like a Goblin Necromancer. It blows up when you kill it. It's got Blinding Sulfur to try to incapacitate you by blinding you, and it can punch you with its fist. And then finally, Zombie Dragon it's got a putrid viscera breath weapon, where it tries to do its breath weapon, but just kind of viscera come out of it instead, and does poison and bludgeoning damage.
Another entry in the category of creatures whose wings wouldn't let them fly on their own, but in fact that's what its description says, that it's the necromantic energy that allows them to fly.
That's right. And it's got claws and tail, and it's got upper jaw, because if you look at the picture, it doesn't have a lower jaw.
Nah.
Doesn't have jaws, and they still have hoarding instinct, even though they are mindless. Just the amount that they like hoarding things is still in there.
But the things that they hoard might be like bones and rocks and corpses and other things that don't necessarily have monetary value to anyone else.
So, Linda, can you be biased about the ability glossary?
Well, ability glossary is super convenient, because then you don't have to reprint things constantly, so you have more space to create creatures.
Yes,
we talked about these
and
abilities.
you can put things like troop defenses in there so that the troops don't have to repeat them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another saving grace of poor Terracotta. There's no way it would have fit in otherwise.
True.
Look at how long like some of these troop abilities are.
And then we've got the descriptions of what all of those traits are. So if you're wondering what any of them are, or what's going on with those rituals or pacts, or what the new languages are that you might be able to speak based on these creatures, there's also a list of creatures by type and level.
That's right.
And a giant creatures by level table, where you can find everything that this book has to offer.
From Clockwork Spy.
And understand why it took us 8 episodes to get through this.
From Clockwork Spy to Hecaton Carries Titan.
That is true.
Plus, look at this OGL.
Yep.
And there's ads.
All right. And there's ads. And the back cover. And with that, we have gone over this book in great detail.
We sure have.
I'm going to go ahead and flip that back to the cover, and then let us say goodbye to YouTube.
All right. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you next time.